you make a really important point about the, if you don't allow people to express themselves, if you don't give people that democratic space that everyone should have a right to raise concerns, raise issues, without being shouted down, without being demonized, without being criminalized, then you do make the situation worse. And I think that's what we saw with the riots on O'Connell Street a couple of years ago. I referred to them as the fury of the cancelled, because I thought they were despicable riots. But if you put a lid on tensions, eventually they will blow. And the thing that I've noticed when I speak to the cultures out west is that this is the issue through which they most keenly experience their dislocation from political life and their dislocation from democratic life, because they wake up one morning, the local hotel is no longer accessible for a pint, which is the case in one of the towns I visit. There was a hotel there which is now fenced off. It's got immigrants in it, and you can't go in there for a roast dinner on a Sunday or a pint, which people used to do all the time. That's gone. They're told they're racist if they make any complaints about that. They're told that they shouldn't have access to the moral plane if they raise any issues at all about borders or migration. So it feels like it's the issue through which they've been disenfranchised, and people feel that really strongly. But you mentioned there the kind of growing cultural divide, and I did want to ask you about that, because I wanted to ask you how much you think class contributes to this, and you've touched on the question of class. But here in the UK, if you look at the protests at the hotel in Epping, for example, and now in Leeds and Nottinghamshire, people are protesting outside migrant hotels. The protesters are very often working class people, good people for the most part. Working class mums are making up a lot of these protests. The counter protesters who are there to defend the hotels tend to be from the graduate classes. They're often even quite posh. They read The Guardian, of course, all that kind of stuff. To what extent do you think this growing cultural divide maps onto a class divide? What do you think is going on with the entanglement of all of those different concerns?
Oh, it's hugely linked. It's the class divide that is really driven by a geographical divide.
Right, yeah.
In the sense that it's the working class areas that are most great, and the rural working class areas that are most gravely impacted. There's no hotels in leafy Dublin 4, to use that old cliche, that have been turned into immigration centres, as far as I know. I'm open to correction, but I think we would have heard a lot more about that, because the locals there tend to have more political clout, because they're the accountants and the doctors and the barristers and what's known as the Dublin 4 elite. So they have far more pull than somebody from, say, Crumlin, where I'm originally from, in Dublin 12. They don't know who their TD is. Most of them didn't go to university. It's a solid, good, strong working class area. And I'll give you a very quick, it's a slight digression, but I'll give you a very quick attitude or example of the attitude from the Irish media towards places like Crumlin. About 10 or 15 years ago, there was a big gang war going on in Crumlin between two rival drug gangs. There were bodies being dropped every week. We'd never really seen anything like it. It was very vicious, very nasty. I was only a young fella starting out in the Irish Independent, and the star feature writer, she was sent out to Crumlin to cover it. And I'd actually said, well, actually, I'm from Crumlin, and I know the families involved. And they went, no, she wants to do it. So, I was like, okay, fine. When you're new into a place, you don't want to step on any toes anyway. And she came back after spending an afternoon in Crumlin, and she sat down and very dramatically put her head in her hands. And she went, my God, it's no wonder they're killing each other. And I was like, what? And she went, those conditions, it's no wonder. And I went, hang on a second, I'm from Kildare Road, which is one of the roads that's fairly central to the Crumlin feud. And I went, I grew up there. I was fairly young, you know what I mean? And she was the chief, officially the chief features writer. That was her role. So the Queen Bee. And, but I kind of lost it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, how dare you
talk
about where I come from like that? So these people are not savages, you know? And she just had that very, that very haughty kind of middle class thing where they just toss their hair and go, oh yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
And it was infuriating, And to think, what I've never forgiven her for, and a lot of this came out around the time of those gang feuds, and I'd find myself defending Crumlin and defending Drimnagh because they were great places to grow up. And these toe rags had largely ruined it for everybody else who was still great and known as a solid working class community. And the amount of middle class, ignorant journalists who only ever drive through a working class area when they're on their way out to Dublin Airport and they have to go through some of the north side suburbs, they were only too happy to accept that people from Crumlin were almost more genetically predisposed to killing each other than people from their graduate class were.
Yeah.
And it was bloody infuriating, to be honest with you. And then eventually you kind of have to laugh it off. But I mean, I was on a couple of Irish TV shows talking about this, going, like, you can't just demonize an entire class of people. You can't. It's like, this is outrageous. But they could, and they did. And they still do. Yeah. And you see it even with Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Now, I can't stand McGregor. Right? Don't like him. I think he's come out with some awful nonsense in the past. I don't like the cheap parody of Irishness that he sells. But on the other hand, good luck to the lad. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't watch him fighting, but I don't lie awake at night giving out about him. But I've seen people from, the mythical leafy Dublin 4, the middle class areas, and which is predominantly who fills the journalistic classes. And they go, oh, well, McGregor, well, there's no surprise that he's so much of a thug, he's from Crumlin. And I'm sitting there going, I'm from Crumlin. Yeah. I haven't hit anybody since I left school. Like, they have this idea that we're all just kind of, mindless, tattooed apes going around punching or shooting each other. And one of the things that really struck me was the way the likes of Crumlin and Tala on the south side of Dublin, and the way, say, Finglas and Cabra on the north side of Dublin are portrayed by the Irish media is very much like how Punch magazine portrayed the Irish back in the 19th century. And everybody goes mad when they see those old Punch cartoons. About the Irish being apes and monkeys and, uncivilized, filthy savages. A lot of the stuff I've seen in the Irish media in the last 10 to 15 years, when it's talking about Crumlin or Tala or Drimnagh or Artane or Finglas on the north side, it's just Punch. It really is just, it's like Punch magazine again. And and nobody seems to care. It's really infuriating. It seems like there's nobody advocating for the working class of Dublin anymore.